Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by BlueSquared, your strategic digital partner.
Aren't you in a good mood today in the morning?
Come on. Betcha.
There you go. Good. See, it's the way to start a Friday.
It's the way to start a Friday, baby.
Hey, Cyrus. Good morning.
Hello.
Cyrus.
Hey.
How are you?
Hey, everyone.
You got a full crowd today, man. And I'll tell you, we're a little ornery today. We're kind of our energy is up.
That's great.
Yes, it is.
Except Ian is delayed, so don't feel bad if you notice that.
It is Friday.
Yeah, he waved 5 minutes ago. It's just coming up now.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see if I make anything better or worse.
So Cyrus, welcome to our podcast. And today we were hoping, or actually we're going to talk about personality types, how they interact a little bit, how they can function in a highly dynamic environment like cell and gene, and maybe some emotional intelligence tips from you on how to navigate when you come up against roadblocks and how to effectively do that. So with that, do you want to just give us a quick little introduction to Enneagram, which is, so we all took the Enneagram test and we all have our personality types, and I'll turn it over to you to give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And the Enneagram is a lot of things. It's one way to look at it is it's a map of our personality patterns that start out young, and there are 9 different ways they show up. There's more than 9 different ways. There's subtleties, but there's what we call 9 core types, and they're kind of responses to how we think we need to navigate the world. And we have underlying motivations that show up in the way we navigate relationships, in the way we decide what our role is, like the stories that we live by at work. So we might take ourselves to be a natural leader, or the one that's going to be more of the listener and participant, or one who's going to be rocking the boat a little bit. You see, we come in often without recognizing how these personality patterns are actually showing up in our daily experience, and not just at work, but in the wholeness of life.
Right. So you said there's 9 different types. We lost one of our types who seems to be in the dark, but I'm sure he'll be back. You said there's 9 different types, and the other day you were kind of going through a kind of an interesting thing, because you said, when you're on a project or something, the 1 is going to do this and the 2 is going to do that. And that was kind of interesting. If you want to maybe share that.
Yeah. Well, so first, maybe I'll share that in sort of the well-roundedness of who we are, the wholeness. Welcome back, Ian. We actually have all these 9 types in us. We have a core that we get a little bit fixated on. Sometimes the Enneagram is referred to as the 9 fixations. But yeah, the way they might show up, if I briefly went around, I think the analogy that was coming up was, well, if you're stuck in an island, who would you want to be there with you? Okay. And it was kind of a trick question, a leading question, because there's something about the gifts of all 9 patterns that help us survive and even thrive on that island. Mm-hmm. So if you go around the Enneagram, the 1 is more around making sure that things are going to be okay from like the moral order of the universe. Like, what do we need to do to make sure people aren't chewing each other up? There's a right and wrong way to sort of get, to show up in this way. The 2 is the natural helper orientation. So the 2, if there's someone injured or needs to be tended to, in the kindness of their heart, is going to be there in that way. The 3 is more the goal-oriented, motivating, inspiring type. They're gonna, almost like the Energizer Bunny, they're gonna make sure things get done. Like, let's collect the wood, let's make sure we have everything we need to survive. And so yeah, we can go around. If it's supportive, I can go with all the types as well and say a few things.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Right. Yeah, the 4 in the introspection, the gift of introspection, is going to be there for your feelings, even the darkest of feelings. Sometimes in the average state, the 4s have an appreciation for melancholy, whereas many of us will like, I don't want sadness in my life. So the 4s might tend to that. The 5s in the objective sort of clarity that they want to bring and may set aside the emotions in the interest of being objective, almost like teacher or professor like, okay, what do we need to do? Actually, for those of you who remember the Gilligan's Island, like there was the professor role.
Yeah.
I always thought of that role as a type 5, the person that figured out how to survive based on all the natural elements that were there, and brought objectivity in. The 6 might be concerned about what could really go wrong, and in that way, have a knack for making sure that things that we normally may not think about are addressed, in terms of like the risks associated. And the 7 in that entrepreneurial, living into the possibilities of the world might say, hey guys, let's get up and explore this island. I'm sure there's a lot to see and do. So sort of a natural fun orientation that can emerge. I'm simplifying here, oversimplifying for effect,
Sure.
but you can get sort of where I'm going. The 8 as a natural leader pattern wants to make sure that they can bring some order to the chaos, if there is such chaos, you see. And so they're going to be inclined to protect and to naturally assert themselves in the situation. And the 9, the harmonious of all the types often, is wanting to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, that there's a collaborative environment to operate in, you see.
Okay.
So it's all 9 types have a role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the 9s get picked on a lot? I'm just curious because I think our 9 gets picked on a little bit.
Should we let the 9 in the room speak to that?
Yes.
The 9 is under duress.
Cyrus, a question to you. Do you think companies should look at setting up teams of 9 and try to incorporate all types of personalities? And have you ever met organizations that actually take this into account? They make people take personality tests and then set up teams accordingly.
Yeah, it's a good question. It gets a little bit into what one might call social engineering. There's a good intention behind having all the 9 types there for the diversity of perspective, and there's a lot of good that can come out of that. It gets a little tricky though. So it turns out, like, if that happens more organically, more naturally, and as leaders, by the way, if we have an eye towards differences in personality so that any one type or collection of types isn't dominant, that could be supportive, right? In all the ways that diversity might show up. So there was an experiment I do recall maybe more than 10 years ago where the Enneagram was used in interviewing candidates. Typing was a part of that. I won't name the company, but there was, I think, mixed results in that. So,
What do you think about earlier in life, right? School or college, maybe, where maybe, and I guess we do change throughout our growing through life, right? But would it be beneficial for the high school kids or the college students to understand what their type is and maybe put more emphasis and strengths, and maybe that can help throughout their education process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm going to draw my personal example because I've been using the Enneagram with my family, with my 2 daughters, since they're quite young. The older one, who's 20 nowadays in college, really appreciates it. Because when she has challenges navigating her friendships and like social concerns, she'll draw some empathy and understanding from trying to guess at least what kind of orientation, what kind of pattern is is emerging from her friend. And that's a really important part of the Enneagram. Unfortunately, nowadays there's a lot of pop culture Enneagram where, oh my goodness, you must be an 8 or a 5 or a 3. And it's like, for those of us who've been doing some work with the Enneagram, like, no. How might we use it for deeper understanding and empathy as a part of our broader emotional intelligence, right? So I would say in terms of early childhood, the only thing I notice, I'll name this, is that in the early teenage years, the inner critic, which is part of our psychology that sort of judges ourselves, tends to start growing and magnifying. And the Enneagram, I've noticed with my younger daughter, can backfire a little bit, where she does not appreciate the aspects of her sixness that's so loyal to her closest friends, that's so other focused, for example, but she'll notice, like, why am I so anxious all the time, and why can't I get over my fears? And so we have to be, I guess, careful with when we're understanding how the personality pattern works, what is that we do with it.
I was thinking of doing that for my kids for Christmas. So,
Happy Merry
well, good luck.
Christmas. So,
Cyrus, have you? Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
No,
I was
your
going to
question.
ask whether you've ever seen a score that was really interesting and confusing to you at the same time, because it was so balanced that you couldn't really determine where a person lies as far as their personality types.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Victor. So you're referring to the survey results. So there's a lot of Enneagram surveys out there,
Correct,
and
yeah.
many of them will show where we stack in the 9. So you'll have a number next to like your highest number. I've seen just recently someone who had a 3-way tie across 3 numbers.
oh wow.
Now,
Mine was a 2-way.
Okay, so yeah, Armin, so to your point, the wings or arrows, so we have a core type, and it turns out we have these other patterns that we naturally orient towards, and those could be what's called our wings or arrows. And so sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes if we do some deliberate intentional work on ourselves over the years, we might realize sort of the shortcomings of just being in the type 3, let's say, and noticing the harmony that might come from the arrow of the 3 to the 9, for example, where there's a lot more ease and a lot more harmony and less Energizer Bunny, sort of the 3-ness that can show up. So it could be that. Other times, to be honest, it might be that the person is not in a healthy band or high functioning band of their personality. And so what might happen is that the sort of the level of self-awareness may not be deep enough when answering the survey questions, if I'm being honest, such that it shows up kind of almost randomly, haphazard. So both those things I've observed, it could show both those things, really, like high awareness or low awareness.
Yeah. So one of the things that you had talked about before is, a great predictor of success, I guess, whether it's individual or for a project, is emotional intelligence. So if we kind of get into the sense of, okay, cell and gene, this industry is very new, it's dynamic, it's changing because the science is changing. So you have within an organization or groups within an organization have different roles, everything from let's say on the IT side, the business side, you've got validation, quality, all these different roles. And how do the different personality types kind of manage themselves in this type of an environment? And just so, really quick, you've got on the call 2 8s on the top. You've got, and then so you have 3, 8, and 7 with kind of 3 people that do that. Ray is a 7, I think, is her top one, and then you've got like a 9, and Lan, I forget what your top number was. 3. So yeah, it's interesting. You've got 3 or 4 people that are all kind of, scaling towards that entrepreneur, I guess, if you want to call it that. But I'm curious if you want to talk a little about how you deal with that environment.
Well, one is to just be aware that we all have different ways of coming about things, of tackling things, right? So the 3, 7, and 8 energy is more of what's called an assertive type, more likely to take action, right? And other types might be more inclined to do some like deep planning, making sure risks are considered, expertise is built, or collaboration is there. So I think there's a role for all the types. So in a fast-paced environment where, like cell gene therapy, where a lot of it is about innovation and being an entrepreneur in a space that's new and rapidly changing. So the 7 energy is often the most entrepreneurial naturally because of wanting to taste sort of the different experiences, and taking risks may come more naturally. The 8 orientation, because of the leadership and getting things done, may say, yeah, wonderful idea, let's do it tomorrow, you see. Whereas someone, let's say, with
Today.
a,
That doesn't happen with us, does it, Ian?
Today.
well,
Today.
in the ready, set, go, I think we should talk about this last time, the 8 energy, and the 3 also kind of like, just go, 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 you see. Now, the other types, like the 5s and 6s, sometimes the 9s, might be, wait, hold on, wait a minute, where were we even going, you see? The 5 might say, like, do we even know what we're up to here?
That's
You know?
that's actually really interesting because we do run into that. So the 9, like in our example, the
Yeah, no one's picking
9,
on a 9.
we're always picking on the 9. That's because so the 3 is running like all of the is the CTO, right? And here's a requirement, and that the 3 is like, yeah, let's go get it. And the 8 definitely is pushing, and then the 9 comes back and says, well, I'm kind of looks up at the ceiling. I'm not so sure if we really. And then the 8 and the 3 just get triggered, I think, at that point. What's your tell us about how we can maybe handle that a little differently?
Yeah. So back to the point around, well, okay, what's it like to understand where this person's coming from? So a way into not letting the personality take over in what's called more of a reactive state, a more triggered state, especially during conflict, is to like pause, right? Is to just like notice your breath, notice your feet on the floor, anything that like gets you centered a little bit, to say, all right, let me try to understand what's happening here. What's this different viewpoint that's coming in? You see, so it's important to first of all acknowledge that, oh, I'm getting a little frustrated here. What am I feeling, right? Like I'm getting angry here, or confused, or upset, or whatever that is. Because if we're not aware of what emotions we're carrying, by the way, you kind of have no hope. You're just going to be in that reactive state. But
So
just
so basically what you're saying is you've got to be a little bit more self-aware and
Mhm.
say, okay, yeah, he's doing his thing. Um, we need to take a beat, have some patience, and hear what he has to say because maybe it's valuable, and then we'll push forward.
Well, not only is it valuable, but it might help us if we're truly curious, if we're truly open-minded, without judgments and assumptions, because that's really a deeper definition of curiosity. Is not, can I be curious about getting this guy on my side? You see, that's not curiosity.
Hmm.
When I'm coaching executives sometimes and we talk about curiosity we can spend a half day on. What gets in the way of that? Well, sometimes it's our personality. Sometimes it's like our worldview. It's shaped by so many things, including personality, culture we grew up in, motivations, values, right? All sorts of things. So I think, yes. So I think the pause is an important part of it. Bringing curiosity is, I think, when everyone, let me not pick on the 9 energy here, but let me bring in my own 9ness, and hopefully we can all bring that in, is that when all voices are genuinely heard sufficient amount of time, beautiful things can come from that. Not just the entrepreneurial vision, and not just like, but like actually getting it done where everyone feels great about it, where the relationships don't get in the way, where egos don't get in the way, right? So it's a predictor of success, emotional intelligence, in so many ways, but only if we come with that level of open kind of humility and curiosity towards each other?
Well, I mean, someone else obviously can ask the question, but so what I notice is when we're under stress, right? We something happens and we want to do this, we want to build it right away, or we want to because of that stress, which is very similar to what happens in cell and gene, right? Because things change. Oh my God, it's not always that easy to take a step back and say, okay, let's listen to the whatever number it is that's giving it the 6 or the 9 or whoever, because now you're under pressure and it's you're feeling stressed, and you're not always able to just take a beat and say, hey, let's all just kind of hold hands and talk about this.
I get that, and the speed of business may at times require that, where you just need to take some risks, and I think as long as it's acknowledged that there might be a good business reason to do that, and at the same time, can there be a follow-up collaboration conversation so that people understand the why behind that, and even if it's a post-mortem or a way into, because that way we're still preserving the relationships, which at the end of the day, if they're not preserved, a whole lot of other things can go wrong. You see, if the trust isn't there, right? If the trust and the isn't there, it's gonna trickle down into the execution of it potentially, right? And a lot of other ways that it can manifest.
I have a question. Would you say that part of the point of this, I like how the Enneagram kind of lays out your score and points. So does that kind of help you have a visual idea of how you can bring your own personality more into balance?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I think, first of all, the bigger thing underlying all this is that the Enneagram is ultimately a developmental map. So what does that mean? So it informs our growth and development, right? It's not a labeling tool at the end of the day. And the way that can show up is we can try to achieve healthier states of our own core pattern, right? Because there's such a thing as a healthy 5 and an unhealthy 5, depending on vulnerabilities and all sorts of things that they may have experienced in their lives. So I think that's one way into it. The other, to what you're pointing to, is taking on aspects of the other 8 types, the 8 patterns, that help us in sort of being more well-rounded, right? And being, in coaching language, we call that in our wholeness, you see. So for example, almost 20 years ago when I took the survey the first time, I had almost no number next to the 8. You see, 3 was there, my arrows 6 and 9 were there. And there are reasons for that. It was sort of a bit of a shadow for me, something I avoided, the natural assertiveness of the 8. And what my coaches helped me realize over the years is that was the most developmental thing, the most helpful thing that I could do to show up as a well-rounded leader and as a well-rounded human being. And so I engage in some practices and self-awareness exercises over time to bring some of that healthy 8ness in me, which I'm loving. And nowadays, by the way, this year my focus is more on my 7ness. Like the 7 is not an arrow or a natural wing of the type 3, but I know that when I can experience more joy, more possibilities, that I show up with an energy that my family members, my team members, my clients can also tap into, you see. So I think, why even limit ourselves to the core type, so to speak? Although developmentally, I think it does help to understand our core motivations and really do some of that work first, and then to sort of branch out, if it makes sense.
Well, we've worked with you quite a bit in the past, right? Before you moved on to do coaching, and I would say you're one of the best managers that I think most of us have interacted with at the time. So, yeah, your style was very effective, I think.
Thank you.
I agree. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, Armin.
Ray, I want to ask you. Sorry, I was going to ask Ray. So, Ray, you're a 7, a 5, and a 1, and they're all kind of close, right? 22 for the 7.
Yeah.
So the enthusiast, the investigator, and the reformer. do you find when you're working either with us or other folks that well, I'm kind of curious which one of us or which one of the personality types that you run into either here or somewhere else you find easier and more difficult to work with, let's say, would before you've got that what Cyrus was talking about, the more empathetic approach. I'm just curious.
Man, put me on the spot.
No.
Well,
That's what we do.
I think it's probably easiest for me to work with people who I understand. So probably people who are more similar to my type. But also, I would agree that someone who's a peacemaker, it's like, okay, great. I love people who are trying to make sure everybody's on the same page and getting along. So that definitely makes me feel at ease to work with that personality type too. I would say maybe I'd be most challenged by the loyalist if I understand it correctly, because I do think, and in the work environment, I'm always asking questions. I'm probably more of the investigator, and I want to know, why certain things are happening. So if somebody isn't asking those questions and they're just sort of like going through the motions, that would probably be difficult for me.
Yeah.
I would say it's difficult to work with an 8.
You are an 8.
I know, because I'm impatient. I like Cyrus said, no ready, no set, just go, just go, and we'll figure it out.
Did you ever have a time when your 8ness got you into trouble?
Oh yes, a lot of times. When I was younger, a lot of times, and in fact, my mom always told me, slow down, think maybe twice, then go, because I would just jump in. So, and I think that got me in trouble many times at work and in my life too. So, but I don't regret it. I think I probably will. I think I will probably continue doing that. That's just part of the personality, I guess.
Yeah, what I like about this is it helps us see ourselves through other people's eyes, because we can never really see what we're like, and we probably, even if we are self-aware, we don't see ourselves the way other people see us, because we only look in the mirror in the morning and then we just live inside our body. So it's definitely helpful to reflect on maybe where our core traits are and what we could be stronger at.
Yeah, well, there's something in what you just said. Oh, Ian, go ahead. I'll respond later, please.
Are you on mute or is it just delayed?
Ian's playing games with us.
Just testing everyone, to make sure everyone is harmonious. Deal with
Yes.
I don't know how my audio video is going, but go ahead. Sorry, Cyrus, I didn't want to cut off.
Oh no, I want to hear what you have to say, please.
It struck me about people are complimenting you as being a good manager, and I was thinking about when you're on a project and you have something to do and get done, you ever go hey, this guy's a nice guy and is helpful, but I'm really going to need an 8 in this situation, even if developmentally it's good for, let's say, the 9 or a 5 to do this. Do you ever have to make those types of decisions, or do you just go whatever they are, we'll just work with it?
So can you say more, though, about, you mean how my personality might show up in that regard?
Let's say you have a project, you need to get something done, and you have 6 months to deliver on this project, and you want to put somebody in head of it as a project manager, let's say. Do you ever go this person, because of their Enneagram type, are going to be more effective, and so I'm going to put them in that role, but they're good at it, it's easy for them? Or do you say, I'm going to take this other person who needs to develop it and might want to, and put them in that role? How do you, because we're going to come across that, right? As we dive into different projects or we have to get something done, there's the growth factor, but they're well, we still need to deliver. So how do you navigate that?
That's a great question. I think, so there might be a natural way in which, because we carry some judgments and assumptions about how people show up, and personality is a part of that. We know their temperament, we know how they might show up with certain projects, certain types of assignments that might show up. I would say in general, though, Ian, Anyone of whatever persuasion, whatever pattern of the 9 types, if they're healthier in their band, that's what we want, you see.
So you would never pick like one type over another, like when you were trying to, when you were doing the management thing and you were filling out a team, you wouldn't say, you know what, I don't want Tom in this role because he's a he's a 2 and that's not going to quite fit. You never kind of would do that.
So there might be an indirect way in which, because it turns out, for example, I did have project managers, and of the 3 or 4, I think 2 were 8s and 2 were 3s. Now, the fact that they gravitated toward that, consciously or not, because they like getting things done, and they were part of my team. And maybe, when we were hiring, I had that kind of unconscious way of showing up. That could be one thing. But what I would say in general, though, is, you see, if we do the work on self-awareness and, being the best version of ourselves, something shifts. Like what we talk about is the average state of each person. But when you're in a high-functioning 6 and a high-functioning 8, and a high-functioning 9 will look almost identical. Why? Because they will be more grounded, they will be more open, receptive, caring, empathetic, you see. That's what we're striving for here. Anything else gets into the tricky area of what's called social engineering. Okay, let's just not worry about anyone's growth and development. Let's just pick on, who's going to be really good at this, and let's go with that. Now, that's not going to serve us in the long term. Now, again, it might be that, let's say quality assurance or risk compliance, that we happen to have a lot of 6s and 1s and I don't have the science behind that, but many of us who teach the Enneagram in different industries notice that. There's something
they self-select, right, into jobs that they, yeah.
Exactly. That's what I mean, is that there's an indirect, maybe natural orientation where that sometimes shows up. Research scientists, are all of them 5s, for example, and 6s? No, it's quite the 5 culture, because you got to get emotions out of the way, objectivity, expertise, and that's considered a 5 way of being, you see. So that happens usually organically on its own. But from a leadership and collaboration standpoint, ideally we're working towards supporting every individual to be the best in sort of the band of their personality, so to speak, and whatever wings and arrows that they have access to, so that it's highly functioning organization. Because those average states are going to start to go away. On the other hand, by the way, if you look at unhealthy states, the unhealthy types are all going to look like each other also. How? They're going to be sort of in panic states, haphazard, not listening, just ignoring each other, you see. They're going to show up very similar also. So.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the chat with Cyrus and our team. This turned into quite an interesting conversation, so we're going to break this up into 2 parts. You can see the second part in 2 weeks. And if you want to get more information about Cyrus, you can visit him at cyrustosun.com. That's CYRUSTOSUN.com. And if you want to learn more about the Enneagram, you can go to the enneagraminstitute.com and read all about different personality types. Hope to see you for part 2.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.